In the serene and picturesque town of Cedar Grove, where daily life seemed to move without a hitch, a tragedy struck that shook the entire community. The brutal murder of Henry Callahan, a prominent figure in town, stunned the residents and shattered the peacefulness everyone had enjoyed for so long. What once appeared to be a calm suburban neighborhood transformed into a crime scene filled with lust, betrayal, and intrigue, revealing the dark undercurrents of a seemingly perfect life. The murder occurred in August 2015, and at the center of the chaos stood the Callahan family. Henry, a 50-year-old real estate mogul, was known for his charisma and sharp business acumen. His wife, Clara, a 48-year-old boutique owner, was admired for her stylish flair and captivating personality. The Callahans had been pillars of the Cedar Grove community for over 15 years. Their marriage seemed flawless, perhaps too flawless, and everyone in town looked up to them as the ideal couple. Meanwhile, next door, the Parker family had recently moved to Cedar Grove. Simon Parker was a university professor, while his wife, Emily, was a landscape architect. They arrived with their 21-year-old son, Jerry, in search of a quieter life after years spent amidst the chaos of city living. They hoped Cedar Grove would offer a peaceful escape, a place where they could lead a tranquil life. However, no one could have predicted the drastic turn their lives would take. And drastic might even be too mild a word to describe what truly happened. Their lives would be torn apart in such a way that it would send shockwaves through the entire community, eventually attracting national attention. Henry Callahan was an ambitious man, born into a middle-class family in Detroit. Through a mix of determination, intelligence, and relentless drive, he broke into the world of real estate. His natural charm and hard work led him to significant success at a relatively young age. By his 40s, he had built his own real estate empire, and his name became synonymous with success. Henry was the kind of man everyone wanted at their parties, the guy people wanted to know and be liked by. On the other hand, Clara Callahan came from a vastly different background. She was the daughter of a famous writer and a respected classical pianist. Clara grew up in a world that valued art and culture. She studied art history at university, dreaming of becoming a museum curator. But life had other plans. When her boyfriend asked her to focus on building a home together, Clara gave up her dreams for the relationship. However, her boyfriend eventually left her for another woman, leaving Clara heartbroken and demoralized, with no will to pursue her career in the arts. Amid her despair, Clara met Henry. They connected instantly with undeniable chemistry, and soon after they decided to marry. 2 years into their marriage, Clara received joyful news she was pregnant. Their family became the picture of perfect happiness. Henry, usually absorbed in his work, began spending more time at home to care for Clara. They were the very definition of a happy family. But this happiness didn't last long. Their child was born prematurely and didn't survive. The loss hit them both hard, and Clara's subsequent attempts to conceive again ended in failure. From that point on, everything changed. Henry, once attentive, became more immersed in his work, while Clara, who used to be full of life, felt lost and grew increasingly isolated in her grief. Reflecting on the beginning of their relationship, Henry and Clara first met at a charity auction. Despite his success in business, Henry felt a void in his personal life. He was immediately drawn to Clara, who at the time was an elegant former model. Clara, having gone through a difficult relationship and heartbreak, saw Henry as an opportunity to rebuild her life. He offered her emotional support she had never received before, and with his status and wealth, he provided Clara with financial security. Their courtship was swift and passionate, eventually culminating in an unforgettable, lavish wedding. The ceremony took place at a grand historic estate, complete with silk drapes, shimmering crystal chandeliers, and a garden filled with thousands of pink roses. Clara wore an elegant designer gown, while Henry exuded confidence in his formal suit. The wedding was the talk of the town. Yet behind the luxury and the perfect image, their marriage slowly began to crack. Henry's skyrocketing career demanded more of his time, often keeping him at the office late into the night or away on business trips. Meanwhile, Clara threw herself into her boutique business, trying to fill the void she felt at home. The loss of their child was a turning point in their relationship. It was a silent wound they never really talked about, but always lingered between them. The nursery they had prepared remained empty, a constant reminder of their unresolved grief. Clara, once so hopeful about starting a family, saw that dream slipping further away. Her continued attempts to get pregnant failed, adding even more strain to their relationship. Henry, while outwardly supportive, became further buried in his work, seeking an escape from the pain he couldn't face. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, turned cold and quiet. Clara would often sit for hours in the empty nursery, surrounded by unused furniture, a constant reminder of the happiness they had lost. Henry, on the other hand, spent his time in his study when at home, burying himself in work to avoid the bitter reality that haunted him. Their conversations became brief and infrequent. The intimacy that once bonded them faded away. Feeling increasingly isolated, Clara poured all her energy into her boutique, which became her refuge from the emptiness of home. Every night, after long hours of work, she returned to a house that felt more like a stranger's place, cold and filled with unrealized dreams. In the peaceful and idyllic town of Cedar Grove, the growing distance between Henry and Clara Callahan became all too real. An invisible chasm formed between them, a gap neither of them knew how to bridge. The sadness they shared, the fears they never voiced, slowly eroded their relationship, creating a tension that dominated their daily lives. By the summer of 2015, their marriage was just a shadow of what it once was. To outsiders, they were still the golden couple. Henry was on the verge of closing a major deal that would further solidify his status in the real estate industry. Meanwhile, Clara's boutique was thriving, with her designs gaining a loyal following. But behind closed doors, they were simply two strangers living together. Their conversations were limited to schedules and social events, and physical intimacy had become rare. Every touch served as a painful reminder of the sadness they never discussed and the dreams that had never come true. For Henry and Clara, it was easier to maintain the illusion of happiness than to confront the ever-widening gap between them. However, this fragile balance was about to crumble in a way that would not only affect their lives but also shake the entire Cedar Grove community. The Parker family, their neighbors, had moved to Cedar Grove in early 2011, seeking a fresh start. Simon Parker, a distinguished literature professor, had accepted a job offer at a nearby university, drawn by the promise of a quieter life away from the hustle and bustle of the city. His wife, Emily, a successful landscape architect, welcomed the opportunity to bring her vision to new projects. Their son, Jerry, an environmental science major, spent the summer at home working on a local conservation project. The Parkers quickly became known for their warmth and intellect, easily blending into the relaxed atmosphere of Cedar Grove. Simon earned respect through his engaging lectures, while Emily's garden designs became a topic of admiration in the neighborhood. At a block party in late June, Jerry saw Clara Callahan in a new light for the first time. The event was hosted at the Callahan home, and as usual, Henry was the center of attention, busy discussing his latest business ventures. Clara, feeling out of place in the crowd, retreated to the terrace for some fresh air. Jerry, also wanting to avoid the commotion, stepped outside and unintentionally ran into Clara. Their eyes met, and Jerry gave a tentative smile. They started talking about gardening, a hobby Clara had recently picked up to fill her lonely days. With his background in environmental science, Jerry offered advice and tips, and from that conversation, a bond began to form. In the weeks that followed, Clara and Jerry frequently found excuses to spend time together. Clara invited Jerry to help her design the garden at her house, and Jerry eagerly took the opportunity to put his studies into practice. As expected, or perhaps not, their first romantic encounter happened on a rainy afternoon in early July. Jerry had come to the Callahan house to discuss the new garden layout, but a sudden downpour forced them to seek shelter in Clara's sunroom. Standing by the window, watching the rain pour down, an unspoken tension filled the air. Clara, feeling a connection she hadn't experienced in years, decided to kiss Jerry. For Jerry, the kiss was a revelation, a mix of excitement and fear. Despite the complexity of the situation, they were both drawn to each other. Their relationship grew more frequent and intense. They were cautious, fully aware of the risks they were taking. Their meetings were secret, often at Clara's boutique or in hidden spots around town. But as the summer wore on, keeping their affair a secret became more difficult. They had close calls, barely avoiding discovery, and each time their anxiety grew. Even so, their deep feelings kept pulling them back to one another. Clara felt as if she had rediscovered the happiness and passion that had faded from her life with Henry. Meanwhile, Jerry, captivated by Clara's sophistication and the thrill of their forbidden relationship, found himself falling deeper in love with the much older woman. On August 10th, 2015, Cedar Grove awoke to a scorching summer day. For Henry Callahan, the day was crucial. He had a pivotal meeting that could secure the biggest deal of his career. That morning, Henry left early, leaving Clara alone at home, lost in her thoughts. Knowing that Henry would be gone all day, Clara texted Jerry, asking him to come by in the afternoon. But Jerry found himself deeply conflicted. Though he loved Clara, he knew their relationship didn't make sense. Jerry saw this as the right time to end things and viewed Clara's invitation as an opportunity to confront his feelings. He replied to her text, agreeing to meet. The day dragged on for both of them. Clara was busy at her boutique, but her mind was preoccupied, filled with anxiety.
Jerry, working on a conservation project, found it hard to focus. At 1:30 p.m., Jerry finally made his way to the Callahan house, his heart pounding. Clara greeted him with a nervous smile, leading him to the sunroom where they had first kissed. Jerry tried to start a conversation, intending to express his true feelings. But Clara, misinterpreting Jerry's hesitation, stopped him with a kiss. Despite the guilt they both felt, they gave in to the moment, surrendering to the desire they had been holding back. Meanwhile, across town, Henry Callahan sat in his office, frustrated as the numbers in his deal weren't adding up. He knew it would be a long night, full of revisions and negotiations. But suddenly, Henry made a snap decision. He would go home to clear his head, then return to the office before dinner. At 2:15 p.m., his car pulled into the driveway of their lakeside home in Crestwood. He noticed Jerry Parker's old truck parked a little further down the road but thought nothing of it, assuming Jerry might be helping Clara with something around the house. As he opened the door, the house felt eerily quiet, but something was off. A half-full glass of orange juice sat on the kitchen table, odd, because Clara didn't like orange juice. Then Henry heard a faint sound from upstairs. Frowning, he climbed the stairs, the noise growing clearer as he neared the master bedroom. What he saw when he opened the door would be etched in his memory forever. His wife, the woman he had loved for 15 years, was with Jerry Parker, the 21-year-old neighbor boy. Henry's shock quickly turned to rage. Without thinking, he lunged forward, yelling for an explanation. Jerry, panicking, fell off the bed, crashing into the bedside table. Clara screamed, trying to cover herself with the sheets. Henry's fury boiled over, and he grabbed Jerry by the collar, yanking him roughly. Jerry struggled, gasping, begging Henry to listen. But Henry was beyond reason. His fists started flying. In the chaos, Jerry's hand found a heavy table lamp. In a moment of desperation, he swung it wildly, the lamp striking Henry's head with a sickening thud. Henry staggered, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal, before collapsing to the floor. The room went silent. Clara screamed, still trying to cover herself, shaken by what had just happened. Blood quickly pooled around Henry's motionless body. Jerry dropped the lamp, his hands trembling, his face filled with horror and disbelief. He looked at Clara, his voice barely a whisper. "What have we done?" Clara, her voice shaky but firm, said they had to hide Henry's body. She couldn't let Jerry go to jail, her eyes wide with fear. Jerry weakly nodded. They quickly dressed, their minds racing with panic and dread. They wrapped Henry's body in the sheets, struggling to carry it down the stairs. Every step was filled with fear and regret. Finally, they managed to load Henry's body into the back of Jerry's truck. Clara then drove Henry's car to a nearby parking lot, making it look like Henry had gone out. Afterward, they returned to the house and began the grim task of cleaning up the blood. Every wipe of the cloth felt like a betrayal, the smell of bleach mixing with their overwhelming guilt. The bedroom that had once been a sanctuary was now a crime scene. For the next 2 days, Clara and Jerry avoided each other, the weight of their secret growing heavier. Clara fielded calls from Henry's office saying Henry was away on business. But when Henry didn't show up for an important meeting, his office sent someone to the house to check on him. The HR manager stood at the door, suspicion in her eyes, asking why Clara hadn't reported her husband missing. With her heart racing, Clara tried to stay calm, lying that she thought Henry was on a business trip. To avoid further suspicion, Clara quickly called the police. The police arrived quickly, their presence adding to the tension. They began investigating and questioning Clara, who struggled to maintain her composure. Meanwhile, Jerry returned to school, consumed by guilt and fear. He cut off communication with Clara, and they agreed not to speak until the situation calmed down. Detective Laura Mitchell was assigned to handle the case. With her extensive experience and sharp instincts, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Initially, she asked routine questions, but soon she dug deeper. Clara's story was full of holes and her unease was palpable. Mitchell began noting every quiver in Clara's voice and every inconsistency in her account. The case grew more complex and suspicion started to hang over Cedar Grove. Detective Mitchell continued her investigation meticulously, observing Clara's every move. When asked when she last saw her husband, Clara tried to reassure the detective that Henry had left on Monday morning for a business trip. But when questioned further, Clara claimed that Henry often didn't disclose his destinations due to the nature of his work. Mitchell took note, then requested access to Henry's phone and email records. Feeling cornered, Clara agreed. Over the following days, the investigation intensified. Mitchell's team found nothing in Henry's phone and email to indicate any business trip. Neighbors reported seeing Jerry's truck at the Callahan house on the day Henry disappeared, prompting Mitchell to question Clara again. When asked about Jerry's truck, Clara lied, saying that Jerry had been helping with yard work. Mitchell, skeptical, noted the oddity of doing yard work in the blistering heat of July but let it pass for the moment, shifting her focus to Jerry. Jerry, still haunted by the memory of Henry's lifeless body, was approached by Mitchell at his campus. When questioned about his presence at the Callahan house, Jerry repeated Clara's lie about the yard work, his voice trembling. Sensing fear in Jerry, Mitchell didn't believe him. She suggested that coming clean would be better for him, but Jerry held firm, insisting he knew nothing. Mitchell knew she needed more evidence. She called in a forensic team to the Callahan house, where they found traces of blood that had been hastily cleaned. Clara's story began to unravel. Mitchell took note of more inconsistencies in Clara's timeline and the growing anxiety on her face. As events unfolded, the cracks in Clara and Jerry's lives widened. The pressure mounted and a breakthrough came from an anonymous tipster who frequently saw Clara and Jerry together, with their interactions appearing suspiciously close. Detective Mitchell dug deeper into their relationship, uncovering secret emails and text messages that revealed the depth of their affair and their desperate efforts to keep it hidden. Confronted with this evidence, Clara's calm facade started to crumble. When questioned about her communications with Jerry, she tried to downplay their relationship as a simple friendship, but Mitchell wasn't buying it. The detective firmly pointed out that friends don't exchange such intimate messages, and she also revealed the forensic evidence of blood found in the house. Clara remained steadfast, insisting that Henry had indeed left for a business trip. Mitchell then turned to Jerry, who had been avoiding contact with Clara for some time. She arranged for Jerry to be brought in for further questioning. Under mounting pressure, Jerry decided to hire a lawyer. During the interrogation, Mitchell slowly broke down Jerry's defenses, piece by piece, laying out the evidence mentioning the blood found at the house and the fact that there was no proof of Henry's business trip. Although Jerry's lawyer advised him to remain silent, the tension on Jerry's face said more than words. Forensic evidence finally confirmed that the blood found in the house belonged to Henry. With the evidence mounting, Mitchell obtained a search warrant for Jerry's truck. Inside, they found fibers matching the bed sheets from the Callahan house, along with additional traces of blood. Henry's body was discovered in a nearby parking lot, hastily hidden. With irrefutable evidence, Mitchell moved quickly to arrest Clara and Jerry. Clara was taken into custody with a look of resignation on her face, while Jerry was also arrested, his fate sealed by the damning evidence against him. The scandal rocked the Cedar Grove community. What appeared to be a perfect life on the outside was, in reality, filled with dark secrets. As the trial began, more details emerged. Henry's colleagues testified about the mounting pressure he was under and the frequent arguments between him and Clara. Neighbors spoke of the tension they sensed from the Callahan household. Before the jury, a web of motives and actions was revealed, each thread leading to the tragic climax. Clara eventually took the stand, her voice shaking under the weight of her guilt. She admitted to the affair but insisted she never intended for Henry to be killed. She described the moments leading up to Henry's death, explaining how Jerry, in a panic, grabbed the lamp and struck Henry. Jerry, on the verge of tears, remorsefully recounted the fateful day, explaining how the fight escalated, and in his panic he hit Henry without thinking. Jerry's parents sat in the courtroom, their faces full of sadness and disbelief. They couldn't reconcile the image of the son they loved with the tragic events that had unfolded. Their grief was evident, a stark contrast to Jerry's attempt to remain composed. Mitchell's testimony was crucial. She meticulously outlined the investigative process, from the discrepancies in Clara and Jerry's stories to the forensic evidence that ultimately implicated them. She detailed the discovery of Henry's body, the fibers found in Jerry's truck, and the blood traces at the Callahan home, painting a clear picture of their wrongdoing. The courtroom was filled with tension as the jury began deliberating for days, the weight of their decision heavy upon them. Finally, after lengthy discussions, the jury returned with a verdict. The foreman stood up and announced their decision. Jerry Parker, we find you guilty of second-degree murder. Clara Callahan, we find you guilty as an accessory to murder. Clara was sentenced to 15 years in prison, while Jerry received 25 years. The Cedar Grove community was stunned, forced to piece their lives back together after the shocking events. This case left a deep mark, serving as a reminder that behind the facade of a seemingly perfect life, dark secrets can lie hidden. The Parker family, shattered by the revelations and the loss of their son trapped in the prison system, became withdrawn. Their grief was a stark testament to the far-reaching impact of this tragic affair. Meanwhile, the Callahan home, once a symbol of success and harmony, now stood empty, a silent witness to the life that had thrived within its walls, now reduced to shadows and bitter memories. As time passed, Cedar Grove struggled to recover from the tragic impact that devastated their community. Every corner of the town now bore the painful memories of the horrific events that forever changed their landscape. The residents attempted to return to their daily routines, but the shadow of the Callahan and Parker case loomed over their lives.
Inside prison, Clara and Jerry led very different lives. Clara, burdened by deep sorrow and guilt, sought to reflect on the mistakes she had made. Every night, she woke from nightmares, haunted by the day everything fell apart. She spent her time in the prison library, reading books on redemption and psychology, searching for ways to understand her poor choices and how she might make different decisions if given another chance. However, her guilt continued to chain her, a constant reminder of her husband Henry's face, which she would never see again. On the other hand, Jerry, trapped in prison, grappled with the same regret while also facing pressure from other inmates. He fought to survive in this new world, trying to keep his distance from trouble but constantly reminded of the fateful mistake that led him here. One day, during a counseling group, Jerry shared about that terrifying moment, how he became ensnared in an illicit relationship and how his panic led to the unexpected loss of life. As he spoke, tears streamed down his cheeks, creating a moment of heavy silence filled with emotion. Meanwhile, outside the prison, the Callahan and Parker families struggled to find a way to move forward. Henry's family, while trying to come to terms with their loss, felt isolated and devastated. They attempted to remember Henry positively, holding a small memorial where they invited friends and colleagues to share beautiful stories about him. Yet each gathering was marred by an overwhelming sense of loss, as if time could not heal their wounds. The Parker family also felt the profound impact of this tragedy. They became extremely withdrawn and reluctant to interact with neighbors, trapped in guilt and shame. They avoided places they once visited with Jerry, and their once warm and welcoming home now felt cold and empty. The pain of losing their son, now imprisoned, made it difficult for them to accept reality. As time went on, Detective Mitchell also discovered that although the case had concluded, its effects still lingered. She continued to reflect on how her life had been shaped by this work, how her decisions to pursue justice sometimes confronted her with harsh realities. While she found satisfaction in solving the case, she couldn't ignore the damage it had inflicted on everyone involved. She began getting involved in crime prevention programs in the community, hoping to prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. Cedar Grove, while struggling to return to normalcy, learned to appreciate the value of community and supporting one another. The residents began holding regular meetings to share stories, celebrate life, and support each other through difficult times. With Detective Mitchell present at each gathering, they felt they had a voice and hope for a better future. As time went on, Cedar Grove gradually learned to accept reality, even though the scars of the past would always remain. The Callahan and Parker families, despite their efforts to move on, would forever be remembered as part of this tragic story, a reminder of the complexities of human relationships and how quickly everything can change. Life in Cedar Grove continued, but with the awareness that behind every smile there could be an untold story. With courage and perseverance, they endeavored to create a better future, turning their experiences into valuable lessons for generations to come. And even though the shadows of the past lingered, hope for brighter days never faded. As time went on, Cedar Grove began to show signs of healing. The community came together in their efforts to rebuild their lives after the tragedy that shook them. Social activities became more frequent, creating space for residents to share the emotional burdens they had been carrying. There was something profound and comforting in supporting one another, even though many still bore deep wounds. Detective Mitchell, increasingly involved in community activities, felt a sense of responsibility to help address the collective trauma. She led several group counseling sessions, assisting residents in expressing their pain and celebrating life, especially the life of Henry, who was taken too soon. In every session, she listened to heartbreaking and poignant stories, witnessing how togetherness could provide strength. Clara and Jerry, meanwhile, led their lives in prison in very different ways. Clara worked diligently to gain an education and skills that could aid her after her release, hoping to prove that she could change. She participated in rehabilitation programs, often discussing the importance of taking responsibility for one's actions and expressing her deep regret for what had occurred. Jerry, on the other hand, felt trapped in an unrelenting guilt. He became more introspective, reflecting on the decisions that led him to prison. He began journaling, pouring his thoughts and feelings into words, hoping one day to share his experiences to help others caught in similar situations. He started to understand that while he couldn't change the past, he still had the power to influence the future. the Callahan and Parker families began to forge an unexpected connection. Initially avoiding each other, they eventually realized they shared the same sorrow. They began to meet in secret, sharing stories about their children and the memories that bound them together. This was a small step toward healing, but for them it marked the beginning of a long process to accept their painful losses. During this time, Cedar Grove struggled to find new ways to celebrate life. They built a memorial garden for Henry, a place where people could come to reflect, share stories, and celebrate the memories of those who had passed. Each year they held a memorial event in the garden, where the community gathered to remember not just Henry but all those who lost their lives due to mistakes and violence. The garden became a symbol of hope, a reminder that while life can be fragile, there is beauty in unity and love. As Clara and Jerry served their sentences, they each grappled with their new identities as inmates. Clara learned to find strength within herself that she never knew existed, while Jerry worked to cope with the shame and stigma that followed him. Both were committed to changing their lives and finding new meaning in their existence. Clara filled her days with various activities, while Jerry found solace in art, drawing and painting to express his deepest feelings. Outside the prison, Cedar Grove began to rebuild their confidence. Although the memories of the tragedy would always linger, the community found ways to celebrate their lives anew. They focused on developing educational and counseling programs for children and teenagers, striving to ensure that the next generation had the tools needed to face challenges in healthy ways. Over time, Cedar Grove gradually rediscovered its identity. While the shadow of the Callahan and Parker case would always remain, this community proved that they were stronger than the tragedy that had once afflicted them. They learned that love, support, and understanding could transform wounds into strength. Eventually, Clara and Jerry were given the opportunity to participate in a parole program. After serving their sentences well and demonstrating their transformation, they faced the possibility of returning to society. Although they would never be able to forget what happened, both were determined to use their experiences to help others, reminding them of the importance of making wise choices. As Clara and Jerry stepped out of prison, they saw the world in a new light. The Cedar Grove community, now stronger and more united, was willing to give them a second chance. On their way home, Clara and Jerry felt a renewed sense of hope, vowing to live their lives with purpose and contribute to positive change in the community that had given them a fresh start. In time, Cedar Grove became a symbol of hope and recovery. The community strived to build closer relationships, share love, and remind each other that while life can end tragically, there is always room for redemption and growth. The strength of community and the recognition of each individual's worth became valuable lessons that would continue to resonate with future generations.